And welcome in to Facebook Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me, wearing his glasses, is Gary Stein, the voice of UMBC basketball and the owner of Studio 83, video production house. How are you, Gary?
I got to see Stan. That's why I got him on.
I understand. And with us, a special guest tonight, Terry Hasseltine, who's the executive director of Maryland Sports. Just as an aside, Gary and I, about a month ago, Gary brought me the idea of having Elliot Steinmetz on, who is the head basketball coach of Yeshiva University, Orthodox Jewish school. They play in New York. And what division are they in, Gary?
They're in Division III.
Division III. They had won at the time about 44 games in a row. And Gary said, what do you think about having the coach on? And I said, great, book them. Gary tells me about 10 days ago, he goes, I booked them, but they've now lost the game. So I don't know whether the coach was upset, but he backed out of doing the show tonight. I'm sure it was something less sinister than a press box Zoom jinx, but Terry has.
Is this like
I don't know. You
illustrated
never know.
cover jinx?
Yeah, it's just like that. It's just like that. Anyway, we wish Yeshiva University well, and we also wish Elliot Steinmetz's son, Jacob Steinmetz, third round draft pick of the Arizona Diamondbacks, a pitcher, and he is the first Orthodox Jewish pick to go in the draft in MLB. So that's a big story.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
We've got bigger stories to talk to Terry Hasseltine about. Terry, we were due to have you on anyway in about a couple of weeks, and we moved you forward a little bit. And this story breaks over the last 24 hours that Washington's bid to host games in the 2026 World Cup may have gone down the tubes a little bit with the latest stuff going on at FedEx Field. Can you comment on that? And there's talk from some Washington journalists, it was reported in the Post, that maybe Baltimore and Washington would now join forces. So I leave it to you to illuminate our viewers.
Well, I mean, the concept has always been out there. I mean, look at back when we went at the 2012 Olympics, it was a Baltimore-Washington bid with Washington being the central identity of the bid. But it took the fabric of the state of Maryland and Baltimore to really bring it all together to make sure they had the collective whole of all the pieces that were there. In this case, it's a matter of, I think, some recently bad, publicity about what's going on in the building. And that's obviously up to the football team and how they want to address that. I also think there's just some people who are just speculating about what is in the best interest of the future of the World Cup in the United States. Obviously, having the nation's capital, in the bid is very important. It would be the first time a nation's capital has not been in a World Cup bid host opportunity. And I think there's just some people out there in the soccer community as well, just saying, hey, based on logistics, based on the reality of where Baltimore and DC sit, does it make sense to combine and collect, the greater good of the capital region? I'm not necessarily saying I'm opposed to it. I just, right now, U.S. Soccer and FIFA have asked us to remain two independent bidding entities. And until FIFA and or U.S. Soccer comes to us and say, hey, let's follow this idea further to ensure that the North American bid has the best venues and the best people at play to ensure that we host the best World Cup in 2026 in North America. And we're ready to listen. We've been receptive to everything FIFA's asked us to do. We've been receptive to U.S. Soccer and the things that they've asked us to do throughout this entire process. So we're here as a team player. Our mantra and our entire bid is together as one. And if they tell us together as one is Baltimore and DC merging to some degree, well, then that's in the best interest of North America hosting the event. And we will do our part to ensure that, we are there to be at the table to have that conversation.
I just want to ask before Gary gets a couple questions in, to be clear though, you have maintained great enthusiasm and optimism about Maryland's bid, regardless of this situation with Washington, correct?
I really like our position. I think our stadium is, world class. I think FIFA saw it as that when they came for the Ravens Chiefs game. They saw it in great light. We love our consolidated footprint that we presented. We love the legacy program that we're putting forward. Our teammates and our partners that have been out there in the community, corporate, as well as, other folks who have just contributed to the effort. We put a lot of hard work and a lot of energy and blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And we feel very confident on our own merit, but we also would be receptive if US Soccer, if FIFA tells us that we need to add someone else's merit into the equation. And we'll see where those, cards fall in the future. But right now I feel really good about where Baltimore stands, on its own.
Terry, let me ask you about Baltimore in general and not having to do with the stadium. Like, we know the stadium is a top-notch stadium. It's hosted soccer before. I'm sure it got great marks from the committee when they came to see the Ravens play the Chiefs. But other stuff that goes on downtown and around the city, will anything need to be built around the city? Will any major changes happen to the downtown landscape in order to get this bid and in preparation for 2026?
Build, no, some temporary overlay in certain areas in order to host Fan Fest, in order to host some of the things that go along with the event, yes. But to build net new, no. We presented a very compact footprint incorporating the convention center as part of the stadium complex grounds. We presented the Inner Harbor, South Point, and some other locations for Fan Fest related activities. All those things will require temporary overlay, large tenting structure, staging, and those type of things, and some window dressing, just to bring the city alive and show that the World Cup is in our community. But it doesn't require any net new permanent build. However, the legacy of hosting a World Cup could be significant in some net new build down the road, meaning that corporations across the globe will see Baltimore as a vibrant city that it is, a city that has a can-do attitude, that can get things done when they put their heads together and to do things together as one. We can do a lot of great things. And I think the World Cup presents us an opportunity to present to the world that Baltimore is really a tier one city that's got a lot of things going for it. We're not always getting the press out there locally and the others that says it is. But I can tell you right now, when I talk to my colleagues across the country, we're dealing with some of the same headaches that other cities are dealing with. It just happens that we just happen to have a target on our back that focuses on that negative energy. And the World Cup, to me, is the thing that can change that narrative and bring that positive focus. Our human rights and our workers' right plan is about engaging the community. It's about bringing the game to places in the city that probably have never seen the game before. An opportunity to coalesce in the entirety of Baltimore around one common theme, and that's that can-do together as one attitude. And it's a great way to change the narrative and move us forward. And I'm excited. I know our committee is excited. I know the Lieutenant Governor and the Mayor are excited about the potential of the World Cup being in Baltimore, Maryland in 2026.
Yeah. So, Terry, let me ask one more and then I'll turn it over. So I had the pleasure, as I'm sure you probably know, of working for the NFL for 15 Super Bowls in a row, actually. And as you know, it's more than just the Super Bowl. It's the Super Bowl week. It starts on Monday, it ends on Sunday. Sometimes it even bleeds over to the following day. And as I'm sure you know, there are multitude of activities that go on, concerts, comedy shows, all types of stuff. How long do you anticipate the event to be in Baltimore? Like, will it be a week? Is it 2 weeks? What's the length of it all?
We're talking about, the window of the entirety of the World Cup is about 31 days. We're looking at probably an impact in Baltimore of about 3 weeks, talking about the pre-stuff that we have to do in order to get revved up and ramped up with all the infrastructure built and the like, and start seeing some activity happening in and around the World Cup. If selected, I shouldn't say if, when selected, we have the opportunity to host probably anywhere between 5 to 7 matches in Baltimore. And if anybody knows about the World Cup, that's like hosting 5 to 7 Super Bowls in a 2-week period of time. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, whether they get into the stadium to watch a match or not, are going to be at the Fan Fest, cheering on their favorite team. They're going to call Baltimore their home base, during the tournament. They're going to be out at restaurants and at bars and, using all of our hospitality infrastructure. So you're talking about a 3-week impactful time period where people are spending, money, people are taking in our local fare, And then it's our job to make sure that those people expand outside what is known as the core part of Baltimore. We get them out into the neighborhoods. We get them out to see the cultural things that belong to their way of life. So when people come in from Nigeria or Kenya or the Netherlands or whatever, we have places in Baltimore that fall within that demographic, and making sure that we're showcasing it's a way to bring an international festival right to the city, and making sure that every demographic and every person has an opportunity to touch this event. And that's been part of our footprint from day one, is making sure that every Baltimorean has a chance to feel and or be touched by this event.
Great answer, Terry. You've been, by the way, you and I met very quickly upon your arrival in Maryland. You were on the last cover, not you personally, because we didn't have pictures at the time, but we had a ticket. We had a ticket to the game.
Yep.
When you made your decision to come here and become kind of the face of Maryland sports and the ability to bring in big events.
Mhm.
How big a part were Camden Yards? And at that time, I don't think it was M&T Bank Stadium yet. I think it was, I think it might have been Ravens Stadium again after losing the PSI net. But how much did that play into your decision to come here 13 years ago?
Well, to share a little story, Stan, you were my third cup of coffee in Baltimore. So that shows you how early on that
Who beat me to the punch?
Clarence Bishop, who was one of the people that hired me, and,
Okay.
and Hannah Byron, who was on the hiring. So they were the first two when I officially came on the job. So you were my third cup of coffee. So thank you for that. And having Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and it was actually just had become M&T Bank Stadium at the time.
Okay.
Were a big part of my thought process. It was to have two major league clubs playing in these world-class venues, knowing that we had this anchor support tenant, and then knowing that the other things that we had to build through Team Maryland and build through the youth and amateur sports stuff, where my focus has been primarily, knowing that we had these anchor tenants that we could rely on to partner up and strategize on. We landed, Army Navy games again back in Baltimore shortly after my arrival. We got the NCAA lacrosse championships, and then we got that huge soccer friendly with Chelsea AC Milan, which is still the largest sporting event in M&T Bank Stadium history. So you add those things in. So we got off the ground really fast, and then that was really, a great experience, because it allowed people to understand that we were really going to focus in on this industry, and we had now had some things in our back pocket that said, we proved that we can do these things when we collaborate together and we work in concert, and then bringing the whole Team Maryland concept together. And that allowed us to host the World Championships at Canoe Slalom, kayak out in, Western Maryland. And then we, bringing on the 5-star, now bringing on the Cycling Classic, going after World Cup bids and soccer friendlies and all these things. They just morphed together. But it was that early on having, those two stadia and, two partners that we knew that we could go right out into market to, start creating an identity and a brand for the state of Maryland in the sport tourism space was critical,
So
and a good part of my decision.
So now, and 13 years later, do you feel that this is sort of the potentially crowning moment of your time in Maryland? If this gets pulled off to its maximum, conclusion.
When we land the World Cup in Baltimore, Maryland for 2026, it will be a very proud moment in my time here in Maryland, but it should be a very proud moment to the citizens of the state of Maryland, because without their buy-in and without their support over the years, we wouldn't have been able to lay some of the foundation that's necessary to pursue an event like the World Cup. Yeah, do people think the World Cup might be a rung above what our capabilities are? But that's why we started our mantra as the underdog, because we knew that we had to fight, scrap, and pull things together. That's kind of what makes Baltimore, kind of the special place, but also what makes Maryland such a special place is that we don't have the land mass that some places have. We don't have, some of the other things that some of our competitors might have. But when you push us, we're going to shove back and show you how we can step up and be that place that people anticipate and expect us to be. And that's what I think the World Cup will be, that big crowning moment that says, we arrived, folks. And, you're going to be around for a long, long time seeing us do a lot of great things.
So, Terry, here we sit, I'm sitting. I think we're all sitting. Before I get there, just to make sure that we're right, you got here in 2008?
Yes, August
And
of 2008.
and John Harbaugh got here in 2008. So that 2008 was a big year for Baltimore sports.
There you go. Well, I'll take it. I
Okay,
love being in the
gotcha.
same breath as coach.
Maryland sports, Maryland sports.
Maryland sports, correct,
Yeah.
correct. So as we sit here, January 20th, give us the timeline now. When are decisions due? What more do you have to do? Are there more meetings coming up? What's the story?
So we're looking at a decision date somewhere between, late March, early April to as late as maybe May 1. It all depends on, what has to be buttoned up on other locations. We know and we feel very confident that we've done everything to date that's been asked of us. We've got all the agreements that are in place. We have our human rights and workers' right plan posted. That was the last thing we had to do before the end of the calendar year. That's live on Baltimore MD 2026.us. It's a working fluid commitment document that we show that we're going to move those efforts forward at a very high level to ensure that when people come here, whether you're working, whether you're a participant or whether you're a visitor, you're going to have all the rights and opportunities to be successful and be cared for, in our market. So that's the last thing we had to deliver from that perspective. We're waiting now. We're in a kind of wait period to see if there's any last minute crossing of T's or dotting of I's that FIFA and or U.S. Soccer is going to ask of us. We're taking the proactive approach. We're going to have some things coming out in media. The Washington Post article is out there, but we're going to have some things with the lieutenant governor and the mayor, putting that last push on the effort to show that, we're committed from the state, from the city. Today, I received a really awesome letter from the congressional delegation for the state of Maryland that all signed on to support our bid. So that's all of our elected officials, our senators, and our Congress, men and women, to ensure that we have full support from federal, state, and city, all interweaving together to ensure that we deliver, the best and the greatest opportunity that, the city can see from a sporting perspective, the world's largest sporting event potentially being played right here in Baltimore, Maryland, at M&T Bank Stadium. Our hotels will be full, our restaurants will be full, and our economic and our economy will rise and change that narrative that this can-do city can get a lot of things done when we all do it together.
Sounds good. Stan?
Terry, there's many events we want to talk about. And one that I got out to a couple times, Gary's schedule didn't work out this year, but the Maryland 5-Star. That's been something you've been working on first to try and bring a 4-star event. Then after getting the 4-star, you found out you could make it a 5-star event. It finally happened this October. Your thoughts on the first year and where do you think it's headed?
Well, my thoughts on the first year, and if you were out there, you had to be wowed. I mean, Jeff Newman, Caitlin, Marissa, and Kaylee, Dan, Connie, and the list goes on of the people associated with making that thing. Fair Hill International, the Fair Hill Foundation, DNR, all those folks coalesced and came together, and the venue was first class, first rate. The athletes had a world-class experience in a state-of-the-art equestrian facility that met all the expectations everybody was hoping it would do. A lot of people didn't know what to expect when they got out there, but when you got out there and you saw the overlay build and the dynamics of the hospitality and the vendors that were out there and the lay of the land, people walked back there and went, holy smokes, they pulled off a first-year 5-star as though they had been in it and done it 100 times. Right. And that's the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of folks. However, we learned a lot of solid lessons through the process. We learned, how the facility lays out, how to maybe tweak some things so we can morph a better flow, when it comes to the cross-country course on Saturday. How do we engage more activation opportunities so that, patrons can, during dressage on, Thursday and Friday, and then show jumping on Sunday, engage in those components. And then how do we add on to the team? Because an event of that takes so many solid volunteers and so many people rolling up their sleeves and just giving it their all. And it's a long period of time. You're talking, between setup and then the actual delivery of the event. It's been a labor of love of mine. And I can tell you, when I first walked out there on Wednesday and saw, the jog and the like, and saw that venue, it made me, I lost my breath for a minute, because I was like, going, this looks like what we drew up on paper. And I even heard that from some of our engineers and architects, like, this looks exactly what you put on paper, and this is what you promised the FBI, and we delivered it. Now it's up to us to take that momentum of a very positive first go at it and making sure that we keep a consistent standard of excellence in delivering that venue year in and year out, and overly and help grow the infrastructure so that we don't have to bring in so much temporary materials. But that's not a cheap event to put on. But
No, it's not.
we did a very good job of keeping things, intact. We had some great partners, Select Events, from a structural setup. I mean, hats off to them. B&K and their bleachers that they provided to support the event, another tip of the cap. And then all of our vendors from Dewberry to, like I said, DNR to Mars Equestrian and so many more. Without them, that event doesn't happen, but they stepped up in year one to make sure that we had the tools and resources to be successful. And those are the type of partnerships that we need long-term.
And by the way, if there was any question about the press box Zoom jinx, we had on the ultimate winner. What was his name? Boyd
Martin.
Boyd
Martin.
We had him.
Boyd Rutherford is our lieutenant governor.
Yep.
Right.
Boyd, that's right. That's what was confusing me.
Yeah.
Okay. Terry, it was a great event. I got out there 2 days, and it's really an interesting development. Tell us a little bit about this year. You've got the cycling classic, which had to be postponed last year, correct?
And the year before.
And the year before. So you've had 2 straight years of not being able to put it on. You're pretty confident in putting it on this year, September the 2nd through the 4th. Where
Yes.
does that take place? And what are we talking about? How
So
big
you're
a deal
talking
is
about Tour de France style riders, racing on the streets of Baltimore County and the city of Baltimore, starting out in Sparks, right outside of Kelly Benefits, John Kelly being our chair of our committee,
Okay.
riding through the rolling terrains of Baltimore, County, for about 120 plus, miles, and then making a beeline into the city, doing several circuits within the city on the same circuit, probably 60 to 70 miles of additional riding there, and then with a finish right on Pratt Street. Bringing the whole fan festival and that type of thing down to the east side of the Inner Harbor, towards Harbor East and that area, and bringing a ton of people who really love the sport of cycling to the city of Baltimore over a 3-day weekend. We'll have everything from hopefully a concert that will go on with the team introductions. We have the Bridges of Hope ride, which is a charity ride that will happen out in the county on Saturday. A lot of community outreach programs. Thursday is a day of community. We'll be out in the community working with kids, educational tools and resources out there about how you use the bike as the most efficient form of transportation, how you use it safely. How do we put some bikes in some less fortunate people's hands, and how do we do those things? So it's really a 3-day collaboration of how the bike is such a vital tool for education, for economies of scale, but also for wealth and health and wellness, and making sure that people understand that the bike is actually a really good instrument. And the fact that we're going to showcase a major international pro series event, the only one in North America in 2022, on the streets of Baltimore County and Baltimore City, is really going to be a magnificent sight to see. And people should get out there, cheer on those riders. But really, at the end of the day, this 22 is about building the foundation for the future, because we want to expand the event over the course of time to be inclusive of, other genders. You want to make sure that it's inclusive of all levels of competition. So hopefully over the course of time, we're going to be able to add those things in. But we're currently at the position where certain calendar dates have to open up on all the different schedules in order to bring that to fruition. So starting with the men's pro event on this year, hopefully we'll add a women's event in 23, and then keep adding different components and creating a real festival of the bike, in years to come, so that, whether you're a BMXer, whether you're a mountain biker, there's something that you can connect with over the Maryland Cycling Classic weekend, in the future. But we have to start somewhere, and we anchored it with, having the only pro series cycling event in North America in 2022.
All right.
So
Terry,
just
I
to
know
be clear,
I know you got a couple questions. Go ahead.
yeah, just to be clear, Terry, for our viewers, this is actually a race. There's prize money involved. Yeah. Okay. And and you mentioned the Tour de France, and I know that goes on for days and weeks, but is it going to be segmented? Like, will there be different legs of the event over 3 days, or is it just one race?
This year it's just one race on Sunday.
Okay.
It's a road race, 120 to 140 miles of racing. Teams, World Tour teams, Pro Series teams, converging on Baltimore. They will be out in the community riding. Some of the riders will ride in the event on Saturday, just as kind of a warm up to Sunday. But our goal is to create that, what you just described, that more of that core. So one day would be the road race, one day would be a circuit, might be a time trial, and then we might add a component that might not be part of that 3-leg series, for example, but do a mountain bike. Like this last year, we hosted the U.S. Cycling Mountain Bike Marathon Championship out of Gable Parks in Frederick. Those are the type of things that we might create a series over the course of a year, where one weekend is about mountains and dirt. One weekend might be about BMX, and then another weekend will be about the road component, which is crit and time trials and the road race. So creating this kind of festival of the bike that has 365 days, but creating different segments throughout the year.
Gotcha. And just in the interest of time, I know we've got limited, and also we've got a lot of things to cover. We have an event coming up actually in about a month at the Royal Farms Arena. The CIAA basketball tournament, men's basketball tournament is coming to town. And Terry, this isn't only just a basketball tournament at the arena. This is basically a weeks long of activity around downtown Baltimore, cultural, concerts. I believe Earl the Pearl Monroe and Bobby Dandridge are going to be giving clinics. I got to go to that. Stan, I know that you do too. But just tell us a little bit about that and what the future of that may be.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So I want to add to that. You mentioned it's the men and women's CIAA basketball tournament. So it's both men and women. We'll play at Royal Farms, but you hit it, right on the head here. This is more than just basketball. This is about education, workforce development, DEI trainings, opportunity for, alumni groups to gather. There are various other interactive opportunities between esports and, cultural exchange, to concerts, to you name something that can go on in the entertainment space. It's happening that week of the CIAA. I mean, it's going to be such a dynamic week. You got to get on the website, support Visit Baltimore. They're the lead entity on, on this event. Al and his team have done a tremendous job of bringing it all together. And Jackie McWilliams, the commissioner of the CIAA, she's such a dynamic, leading lady. And she's put her faith in, as have the President's Council for the CIAA in Baltimore. And I know that we are set and ready to deliver. The state is backing Baltimore, making sure that we're there with the resources and the tools that are needed to make this thing come to life. Scholarships are on the line. People are going to be, awarded scholarships throughout the week. So many moving parts, but such a dynamic event, and a big coup for Baltimore to really bring, basketball, HBCU basketball back to the city, and to ensure that, fans have a great time, alumni groups have a good time, and the student athletes have a spectacular time, and all the institutions that are engaged really have a great experience in Baltimore.
Terry, I wanted to touch on, before we get out of here, Michael Bush, who was the Speaker of the House, passed away in the last year and a half or so. And there's a movement from the Michael Aaron Bush Sports Fund to help youth sports in the state of Maryland through grants. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, several years ago, we moved forward with trying to find a way to support the youth and amateur sports market. What a lot of people don't know is the youth and amateur sports market is an extremely competitive marketplace, both domestically and abroad. I mean, when you look at the scale of, funding that's generated through sports, youth and amateur sports generates about $19.8 billion a year on the US economy. NFL, 16.3. So when it comes to sports out there, youth and amateur sports tags much higher from a spend capacity in the US than does the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the like. Now, they're all vitally important. However, when you're competing at a level set like we are against our surrounding neighbors, as well as both and West Coast to East Coast to North and South, we needed to find a mechanism that allowed these events to be successful, to ensure that they picked Maryland as their base camp. And when we were going through the youth and amateur grant program, and the like, and then, getting it established, and then the misfortune of what happened to, Michael Aaron Bush and, and his law. But he was such an ambassador and such a visionary when it came to how sports could happen here, and his commitment to helping Anne Arundel County and Annapolis with, a lot of their sports inventory and their park and rec prov. When it came to an opportunity to be able to connect his name with a legacy opportunity, connecting him to the Youth and Amateur Sports Grant Program, now called the Michael Aaron Bush Fund, was only a natural fit. And I thank Mackie McIntosh and Corey McGray and their leadership for seeing that connection to ensure that we honored his legacy in the sports community, and we honored his legacy in the youth and amateur sports community, where he was so instrumental. So very blessed that we get to call it the Michael Aaron Bush Fund, and communities across the state are being blessed with the funding of that grant program as we speak, as this is the first fully funded year of that program. And I thank the governor and lieutenant governor for their support in making sure that it happened as well, because these communities now can focus in on hosting this event and have some base capital in order to recruit and host these events successfully without having to figure out, where the next dollar might come from. So we're really proud of the program. We're really excited that, to launch it and get it out there this first year. But we feel like the future is really bright, and it's a way to really honor Michael Aaron Bush for all he did for the state of Maryland.
Well, we're going to stay in touch. We're going to follow that, how it develops, and we'll keep fans, the viewers out there aware of this. I've got one last question, and then I think Gary will get one. But it's ironic. Camden Yards is about to enter its 30th season as the home of the Baltimore Orioles, and I think the football stadium is entering, I think it's 25 years now. So
yeah,
and both of them have, ironically, at the same time, their leases are coming up. Can you give us any updates on any news out of those things? Not that I'm expecting there to be like to hear the Ravens are moving or the Orioles are moving. That's not happening. But is there are there some interesting things around the negotiations that might add to the fabric of these two legendary facilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in all fairness, I would leave that in the hands of Mike Friends, the executive director of the Maryland Stadium Authority, to elaborate, more. But it's, really interesting because we're having these conversations with both organizations almost simultaneously. We're doing things through the legislative process to ensure that we have the stability, with the clubs to meet their needs and the demands for the future. I mean, both clubs are obviously making huge moves on their buildings as they, as performance needs are out there. And we're working in tandem with them to ensure that they're able to do the things that they need to do in partnership with the Maryland Stadium Authority and the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. And we're there, and we're having, I'm not directly involved, but really great conversations about the long-term viability of, these teams and the buildings they play in being cemented, establishments in our city and our state for many, many, many years to come. And so great leadership on both sides, with both the Orioles and the Ravens, as well as in our leadership with Tom Kelso and Mike Friends and the governor and lieutenant governor, driving those conversations to ensure that we make sure that, they feel, that we're taking everything that they need as a very important part of that partnership, and making sure that the state and the city and the like are there to, bring it home.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, Stan, it's funny you asked that question, because Terry, my final question was going to be about the third building that houses sports in Baltimore, and that's downtown Baltimore. And of course, I'm talking about Royal Farms Arena, the plan for $150 million renovation to that building, which has now got to be, 60 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe my math is wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
Was it 1952 that it opened?
Something like
61,
that.
I think it opened.
61. Yeah.
So, what's going on with that? I mean, it's so sad, actually. I saw many, as we all did, many a great game in that building. I haven't been back to that building since COVID began, unfortunately. And it's part of me thinks it's almost an afterthought on people's minds. But what is going on with that plan to reconstruct it?
So the Baltimore Development Corporation is running point on that effort with the Oakview Group, which is, Kevin Durant's, group. we should be hearing shortly about what the master, the plan is about how they're going to take the existing building and, reconfigure, repurpose, and redevelop the facility. That should be out in market soon. That's really a Colin Talbert question to answer because they're running point on it. But there is a future for that building, and there's a future with the Oakview Group that we're going to get a building that we can be very proud of. We have a building that we should be very proud of just because of what it's doing economically, between concerts and other shows that it's bringing in. However, to be competitive and to be out there looking at the acts and or the events from a sporting perspective that we want to bring to the building, there's just some natural things that have to occur to the building. One, we have no suites, or we have minimum suites, or we have been retrofitted to be called suites. So we need that. We need locker rooms to be addressed and enhanced. How the seating bowl is configured and the stage work in concert with one another, so that for sporting events as well as concert or theater events that they establish. So there's a big master plan there. I am not read in on all the various details, but from what I'm gathering, pretty significant. And I think we will turn around to end up having an arena in downtown that we all can say, that they made some great steps, and they made the steps in the right direction to ensure that we didn't go through an exercise of potentially relocating a building and or finding out that after the fact that it's not the right fit to where it is in our downtown environment. So I think Colin Talbert and the team are doing a really nice job of driving that forward, and the Oakview Group coming on board to showcase that. I feel very positive that the future is very bright for Baltimore. From the arena perspective, I think our partnerships with our two clubs on Camden Yards is positive. I think the future of landing the World Cup in Baltimore is going to be astronomically positive. And I think having the cycling classic, they're bring it all home, with a really cool bike race, in the city of Baltimore and out in the county, is another piece. We're moving in the right direction to bring things that enhance and create a better quality of life for the citizens of Baltimore and the state of Maryland, one step at a time. But as I go back to our mantra, together as one, we're going to get there.
Terry Hasseltine.
Always
Terry,
great.
From a third cup of coffee till now, it's been a great ride for 13 years, and it seems in some way like it's only getting better. Gar, I know you said I know you're.
Yeah, Terry, was that 3 cups of coffee in the same day?
No, it's actually I'll give it credit. It was day 2. Yeah,
Okay,
it was. We had a cup of coffee, and if I recall correctly, it went to Whole Foods stand.
I think
Whole
so.
Foods,
I think it was Whole Foods, and we just chatted, and you picked me up. I think you had your very economical car.
Yeah,
you picked me up.
I had my Prius. I had one of my Prius. I'm on my 3rd Prius now.
Yeah. So you picked me up, and we went down to Whole Foods, and we had a cup of coffee, and we just chit chatted, and kind of started a good friendship there, and a trust factor that we were going to work in concert on a lot of things together over the years, and we be partners as we move forward, and we've lived up to that conversation from the get-go.
You've been a great friend, and you've actually wowed us here in the state of Maryland. Before you, we were like rudderless in terms of what we're doing now. Terry Hasseltine,
he's right,
has been our guest.
Thank you.
Monday night, I just got some news from Ross Grimsley. We're not only going to have full pack Don Stanhouse, we're going to have Tippy Martinez too. This coming Monday night, 2 members of the Orioles bullpen from back in the 70s, Don Stanhouse and Tippy Martinez, will join Ross Grimsley and myself at 6 o'clock. For Terry Hasseltine, Gary Stein, I'm Stan the Fan. And Gary, I'll give you a call in a couple of minutes. All right?
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.